Hello everybody, it's Mr. Witty here, and welcome to our first lesson in Excel. Today we're going to take a look at the overview of just Excel and the way it looks, what the different components of a workbook are or an Excel application are, and then we'll move at later videos into some of the the more detailed information around actually getting to complete an Excel worksheet. So when you come into Excel, you can see that we are at this opening screen, and you have the ability obviously to look at some of the recent files that you've worked on in Excel. You also have the ability on the left hand side here to open, create a new one, create a new file, go to the home. Okay, so you have some basic examples, very similar to some of the other examples that you would see in Microsoft Office for Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint. All the Office suite kind of has this landing page. And again, remember that this is a certain version of Excel. I believe this is Excel 2010, nope, 2016 maybe. So just make sure that the version that you're using might look slightly different. So just be careful. But this is the version that we're working with. So so you have all these options. So today we're going to work with a blank workbook just to kind of, again, take a look around. Now, you can see up here as well, there's this take a tour section, so you can there's actually tutorials that are built into Excel that can help you with some of these things. But I just want to take you on a little tour around, some of the things that I think are important, or that are important definitely for the curriculum of this course. So when you first get into Excel and you open up a workbook, I guess it's important to know some of the terminology. So first of all, you'll note that we are working in workbooks. So when you open up a file in Excel, or you create a new file in Excel, what you're actually creating is a workbook. And that workbook has several worksheets in it, or can have several worksheets in it. When you first create your first workbook, you'll notice that at the bottom here, you see a little sheet 1, and that sheet 1 is just that. It's the first sheet in our workbook. We can add more sheets simply by clicking the plus button here to add new sheets to our workbook. But the document that we're working in is a book or a workbook, and you can see that by going way up to the top here. And you can see right at the very top here, it's called Book 1 by default. That's the default name that Excel gives an Excel file. So that's kind of an important kind of concept to understand, is that when you're working in an Excel file, really what you're working in is an entire workbook. The sheets are the individual spreadsheets that you will be creating inside of that workbook. Now, generally, at least at the start, we'll only be working in a single worksheet. But at the very end of this course, at the very least, we'll be moving on and looking at some multiple sheet workbooks as well, and how to move information back and forth from one worksheet to another worksheet. But for now, we're going to work on this single worksheet. So I guess the other thing that you'll notice whenever you come into a new Excel sheet is that it again looks very similar to all the other Microsoft applications. You've got your menu bar across the top here, and then you have your ribbon. So each menu option that you select will then pull up a separate ribbon. Again, keep in mind that depending on whether you're working on the desktop version or the online version, the options will be different. The online version is not quite as robust. It doesn't quite have as many features as the desktop version. So when at all possible, you want to be working in the desktop version. So then below that, you can see that we have our worksheet. So at the very top here, if you hover over this is called our formula bar, and we call it the formula bar because it's where we would enter the formulas for any of the cells that we want to include formulas in. Now that's the real power of Excel. The real power of Excel lies in its ability to do calculations automatically without you actually having to do the calculations at all. So that's why we're using Excel. We're using Excel to actually use it to do the calculations for us, not to kind of just display information on the screen. One of the issues I often run into with students is they want to do the calculations themselves and then put the answer in the correct cell. But that's not why we're learning Excel. That's not why Excel was designed as an application. Spreadsheet software was developed to kind of help us, work with numbers, help us work with charts and graphs and things like that. So don't do your own calculations unless you absolutely have to. And for the most part, in anything that we're doing in this course, you're going to be able to use the calculation or formulas and whatnot to do the calculations. Okay, so this is our formula bar. This is where we're going to enter all of the calculations. On the top left here, you'll notice that this is the name box, and the name box just tells you where on the spreadsheet you are. So for instance, you can see right now we're in A1, and I'm going to talk a little bit about columns and rows in a minute, but if I move somewhere else on the spreadsheet, you'll notice that it tells me that that's where I am. I'm in K10. Okay. If I select a series of rows, you'll notice that it only gives me, or sorry, a series of cells. You'll notice that it only gives me the very start point of where those cells were selected. So right now I'm looking at F5, and that's really the only place that it's going to select. So again, I guess one of the things we really do have to understand about Excel and about spreadsheets is the idea of how they're laid out. And in Excel and in most other spreadsheet software, they name all of the columns. So you've got a series of rows and a series of rows and a series of columns. And the whole idea, that's again the whole idea of Excel, to kind of keep track of information in those cells and columns. So we've got this kind of like a table. I guess maybe a table is a better term because a table is the term that Microsoft Word uses. So that's basically what we've got, is like a big table. And you'll notice that all of the columns are labeled with the letters from A through to Z. And if you continue beyond the edge of the alphabet, so if I get past Z, you'll notice that then they just double up the letters. So you can see AA, AB, AC, AD, all the way across, and you can keep going, and it moves to B, and then it moves to C, and so on, all the way down the list. Okay, so you can imagine there's quite a few rows, quite a few columns that you have the ability to use. And then the rows are numbered. So you can see, obviously, starting with 1 and working its way down. And again, the numbers, I couldn't tell you exactly what the limit of numbers are. It's pretty high. So there are quite a number of rows that we can work with as well. Okay, so again, all of your columns are lettered. All of your rows are numbered. And then when we refer to a cell, each one of these individual boxes, each one of these intersections of a row and a column is called a cell. And that cell is always referred to by its column and its row. It always starts with the column and then the row. So this here is in column H, and it is number 6, row number 6. So we would refer to that cell as H6. And you can see that up here in our name box. It actually kind of tells us what that name is. When we move to a different cell, same thing, D3. Okay, so when we're naming cells inside of Excel or any spreadsheet software, I'm pretty sure most spreadsheet software does the same thing, where you start with the column and then you have the row associated with it. Okay, so yeah, then from there, there's not a whole lot of other information that you need to know about kind of the navigation of Excel. Obviously, we will be talking about some of these other features that are available to us up here with some of the ribbons and page layouts and different formulas that we have the ability to work with. So we are going to be talking about those things over time. I guess one other thing we could talk about is down at the bottom here, you have the ability to increase the size of your spreadsheet or decrease the size of your spreadsheet. Now that might seem like a moot point or something that's not very important, but when you're working with large amounts of data and you want to see a group of data, often it's very useful to kind of minimize or shrink down that view so you can see more of your data on the screen all at once. So yeah, that's essentially the kind of layout of a spreadsheet. As I said, remember the whole file is considered a workbook, and we can add another sheet. So now we actually have two sheets. And just to kind of show you that, I'm going to just put something in here called sheet 1. All right. And then I'm going to move over. Oh, sorry, that's sheet 2. Okay, and then I'm going to move back here, and I'm going to put in this cell, I'm going to put something called sheet 1, just so you kind of get the idea that we are actually flipping back and forth between two separate sheets here, okay? So there's sheet 2, and there's sheet 1. Okay, and you can see the other kind of thing to keep in mind when we're actually just generally looking at Excel and entering information, and we're going to get to that in another video, but you can see that when we click on sheet 1 or we click on a cell that has information in it, that information shows up in our formula bar, and we can actually click on that formula bar to edit that information. So if I wanted to call this sheet 3 instead, I can go in and I can edit that information in the formula bar. You can access that formula bar by clicking on the cell that you want to edit and then clicking on the formula bar, or simply by double clicking on one of the cells, and now you actually have access inside the cell to change that. Okay, so we want to change that back to 1, and you'll notice that the formula bar has changed to match whatever that cell is saying. All right, so that's the basic layout of Excel. I guess one last thing to do is to talk about how to save a book. Okay, so we've finished this book, we're done, we want to actually save it. Again, just like other programs, we have a save button. We also have a file where we can actually choose save as, and then we can choose somewhere that we would like to save our files to. So in this case, you can save it anywhere. I'm just going to save it somewhere on this computer, and then you have the ability to name it. So I'm going to call it our first Excel sheet, and then I can save it wherever I want to. So I'm going to save it in, let's see here, I'll save it in my BTT folder because that's where we're at here. Okay, first Excel sheet, and click save. And now you'll notice the name of the sheet has saved. That's probably not the best name for our workbook, because again, remember that the whole thing is called a workbook. And that was a bit of an error that I made. I shouldn't have named it worksheet. I should have named it the first Excel workbook. Yeah, so that's it. So that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something in this video, and in next video we'll talk about entering information and formatting information in Excel.